Welcome back everyone. Before we get into today's video, just wanted to do a quick update. For those of you that are new, or if you didn't notice, we do have a new name. Along with that new name will be an entire rebrand, hopefully coming in the next couple months. Along with that rebrand will be a very big announcement, which we are very excited for. So if you don't want to miss that video, make sure to subscribe, turn on your notifications, and follow us on all of our social medias so that you don't miss out on that video. Now, let's get into today's video. The next coach is Kevin Stefanski, which some people might have concern with. This is one where Brevin and I kind of talked about it. Him and another coach in this tier are what we called like the gatekeepers between great and good. Those two, if you said, no, I think he's a good coach, we would understand. If you said he was a great coach, we would understand. In his 4 years in Cleveland, he's won Coach of the Year twice. He's won a playoff game. His teams have always been competent, and especially through this last season of injuries, he's had two big seasons that's just been derailed by an insane amount of injuries. He's got a great front office to help him in Andrew Berry. He's building great coaching staffs consistently. I think what he needs to do to solidify his great status and not be the gatekeeper is to make that deep playoff run at least. Right? As a Browns fan, I would love to see him go win the Super Bowl, but at least make that deep run, beat one of these other good teams in the playoffs, and prove like I can do this. There's been a couple moments throughout the season where he has moments where like, oof, like, ugh, that was a weird decision, whether it's coaching, game plan, roster management, stuff like that. But in the end, his teams are always right there. His last 4 years in Cleveland, his teams have always been right there. Now it's just putting it together and proving it. I think this year will be the big deciding factor. If Cleveland does good this year, I would say he's a great coach. If they fall short again, barring another 75% injured roster, I think he's just a good coach, but he's not going to be able to compete with these other great coaches. So that I think this is a big swing year for him, and Brevin kind of agreed. The next coach we have is Jim Harbaugh. This is his first year back in the NFL. He made a Super Bowl when he was in the NFL with the 49ers. He's a great coach. He's really good at building culture. He's a really good motivator. I think he's really good about putting the proper staff around him and players to fit his staff. So I think he's got all the tools to do it. I don't really see a reason why he wouldn't be great again in the NFL. Now, has he been in college for a little too long and kind of gotten used to the way college is? I think that's a little different now with NIL and the transfer portal and stuff. I think the transition between college and NFL is becoming a lot smaller and a lot easier to deal with for these coaches. So I don't really see him having an issue. The issue I see for the Chargers is switching from what the Chargers have been to being a Harbaugh team. So that'll be interesting to watch this year, exactly how well that transition happens. But I think he's a good enough coach to get it done and get them competing. They're in a hard division, so it's going to make it even more tough for him. But I'm interested to see what happens. The next coach we have here is Mike Tomlin. And he is kind of in that same tier as John Harbaugh. His teams are always competing, competent, pushing. They're always a good team. Even when you think they're going to be terrible, they're still at least good. When you think they're going to be good, they're great. When you think they're going to be great, they're amazing. The thing that's kind of kept him out of the elite, as compared to these three, is it's been a while since that success has actually transferred into the playoffs or making deep runs. There's been the Steelers, they're going to battle, they're going to compete all regular season long, but when they get up into the playoffs against these better teams, it seems like somehow they always fall short. Whether that's him or the players, there's just been a lot of question marks circling around Mike Tomlin. I think he's a great coach, but I think he needs I wouldn't say the perfect conditions because that would lessen his ability as a coach. I just think that compared to these other coaches, he struggles to get past them, get over this hump. It's been a while since he's done it. I'm sure they're hoping this year with Russell Wilson, an aging quarterback, that they can really make that push, and he can solidify himself as a good coach. Now that they assume they have the quarterback they want, they assume they have the roster they want. It's time to put it together and go. Just like I think that entire AFC North, really. I think Kevin's in the same spot. I think John's in that same spot. This is the hardest division in football. You have your rosters. Go win it. Go make a run and put yourself in the elite. I could see the elite, one of these three, joining that elite tier by the end of this upcoming season. Our next one is going to be our other gatekeeper, and that is Mike LaFleur. He was one we were really not sure about. We talked about him. We put him in great. We put him in good. We put him in great. We've ended up putting him at the last spot in great. He's been very up and down. He had those years with Rodgers. They were good. They were good. They fell short. Right? Everyone clowns him, says it's his fault. Was it really? And then the year that it's like, okay, this is their year. They absolutely fall apart against the 49ers, and everyone's calling for his head. Then they come into this Jordan Love era, and everyone expects nothing of them, and they come out and produce at that same level that they were producing when they had Aaron Rodgers. So he's really one where this season is going to determine what exactly kind of coach is he. Is he the coach that's just going to continue to fall short? Is he going to be the coach that has his team play above? Is he going to stay at that gatekeep tier? Is he going to continue to beat these lower coaches but fall to these other coaches and teams and front offices? So I think there's a lot of movement here in this great category after next season. I think all these coaches here could end up somewhere else depending on the results of next season. Where the elite, I don't see them moving. I think they're going to stay right where they're at, and that was kind of the difference. They were solidified. These guys, this season is important. As we move into the good tier, the first good tier coach is Sean McDermott, right? The Bills, when I talked about these coaches, I'm sure your first thought is, well, the Bills have been in that same spot under Sean McDermott. I think Sean McDermott has been in that same situation. Yes, he was another one where we were deciding. I think his big thing is he needs to prove what kind of coach he is without the roster, right? At first, when Josh Allen wasn't doing what Josh Allen was doing, it was really ugly in Buffalo. It was not a pretty sight. Then Josh kind of maxes out his full potential. He's playing at MVP level. They're building this giant roster around him. Brandon Beane's doing an amazing thing with the roster and the front office and stuff. And then now this year, they've stripped back all the old players, all the bad contracts, and they're kind of rejuvenating this roster. So this is a real year for him where the Bills don't have that star power they've always had to say, oh, they're only good because of their stars. They're only good because of their roster, whatever. They only played bad because they've had these injuries to specific players. That's why they're losing these, right? I think this year is a real proving for him. My team is no longer expected to win the AFC. I am in a position where if the Bills didn't make the playoffs, I don't think anyone would be shocked, right? So this is an opportunity for him to go out, have the Bills play at a high level, make the playoffs, and prove to everyone I am a staple coach and I can compete with the rest of these guys. And I think we think that's what it comes down to for Sean McDermott. The next one is Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell, I think he has proved to the point that he is an elite motivator, an elite culture builder. But what he lacks compared to these other coaches is that's where he excels, and he has to rely on scheme to these other coordinators and his staff building. Now, has that worked for other people? Absolutely. Is that the end of the world? No. I don't think he's completely incompetent in terms of the scheme or anything. I know he's a very smart guy. He's a very good coach. But when you rely on staff building, it can come a situation where if you miss one hire, your entire team can come collapsing down after one bad hire of an assistant or one bad hire of a coordinator or something. Do I think he can continue to excel? Do I think he's always going to have the Lions ready to go in every game? Absolutely. Would I bet against Dan Campbell? I wouldn't be excited to do it, that's for sure. So I think what holds him back is that reliance on being able to consistently build that coaching staff. He hasn't had anyone pulled yet, but eventually Ben Johnson's going to get pulled from him. Can he replace him? Eventually the defense, if it plays good and it continues to get built and it keeps getting better, eventually a DC is going to get pulled from him. Can he replace him? It's a cycle that, right? We talked about Sean McVay. Somehow his defense is always playing good. He always has a defensive coordinator going and getting a job when he's an offensive specialist. So his ability to build that staff is huge. Same with Kyle Shanahan, and somehow Andy Reid has convinced Spagnuolo to never leave, so he doesn't have to worry about that. But that's a secret weapon in itself. So I think Dan just needs to continue being himself, and I think he needs to continue to prove that I'm going to continue to have these Lions going year in and year out. I think it's just going to take time if he wants to move up this list. Our next one is Mike McDaniel. I think he's a good coach. We've seen it. His offense is electric. He's from that Shanahan tree. He does everything really well. It's another one of those things of time. They need to not choke. That's important list number one. They actually, 2 years ago, he was not expected to much. They come out, they're balling, and then everyone's like excited, and then they kind of collapse. I know they had injuries and whatnot, but everyone was 2 seasons ago really left a sour taste in everyone's mouth. Then this year they come out, they're electric. Everyone's talking about Tyreek getting 2,000 yards. Everyone's actually kind of not hating on Tua anymore. Everyone's starting to love him, and then they fall short again in a blizzard to the Chiefs. So I think he just needs to get one of those big wins under his belt, a season that doesn't end so sour, and I think he has the opportunity to move up. Zac Taylor is the last coach. He is the last coach in good. When he was originally hired to Cincinnati, I honestly, if I would have done this tier list then, I probably would have put him in the questionable. I wasn't really sure about that hiring. I didn't think it was going to go anywhere for the Bengals. And at first, it was kind of proven. Everyone was like, after that first year, they said, get him out. Like, he's not an NFL coach. And then he turned around, sat down with Joe Burrow, got his team together, and has really proven that he is a good coach. And I think one thing that does play into his advantage is on defense, they have this like philosophy of guns for hires, where they're hiring these players, they're paying these players on these short-term contracts, like prove it, and then they go and get big contracts from other teams. And in theory, that's like a terrible way to build a defense because you're really gambling every time you sign one of these guys. Like, is he actually going to be good? Is he actually going to live up to what we want him to be? And somehow it's always worked out for them. He's got a great DC, so that helps in that sense. And his offense is always humming. You can always trust in the Bengals offense, except against Cleveland. But the way the Bengals operate is kind of unorthodox for some people, but he makes it work, and I think that's what keeps him in the good. We just have to see more time of it working. to get him into that great, right? Get back to that AFC championship game, get back to that Super Bowl in that same way. He's got contracts coming up, he's got contract issues, he's got trade requests, he's got all of these things going on. Sure that up, complete your roster, and make that push again in order to get into the great category. Our next one, and our first in average, is Mike McCarthy. And this is the big one that we had a big dispute on. And here is the gist of it. I don't think Mike McCarthy is a terrible coach. I think he is a very average coach that has to be in the perfect situation in order to succeed. And that was kind of proven in Green Bay, right? He made that one run, they won the Super Bowl. But other than that, he had Aaron Rodgers, an elite quarterback, kind of carrying him. And they always fell short. And then now he's in Dallas, same situation. Dallas have all these high hopes. They're favorites, favorite this, favorite that. And then they fall short. So I think he is an average coach. And if the Super Bowls want him, if the Dallas Cowboys want to make a serious run at the Super Bowl, I think you need a better coach than Mike McCarthy. But in terms of his talent level, I think he is average. Now, we talked about if the Cowboys don't succeed this year, I do think he's in the hot seat. I think that Jerry might have had enough and will fire him. My only question is, number one, would Jerry actually do that, or will he continue to ride with Mike McCarthy? And because I kind of expected it to happen this year or the year prior, I kind of think Jerry would have had a short leash with him when he had Dan Quinn at his disposal, like to be able to fire him and then immediately install Dan Quinn. So I don't know how far Jerry Jones is willing to ride with Mike McCarthy is the number one question that keeps him out of the hot seat. Jerry is a wild card, and you can say he's going to go left and he will jump in the air, do a 360, turn around, and do everything that you thought was impossible. He does not like to do the normal thing. Brevin made it very clear. So I think if the Cowboys don't succeed this year, he would be the number one target on the hot seat, but I don't know if the trigger actually gets pulled. So we're going to have him in the average, but he is definitely one that is probably in a hot seat. Just how hot is his seat? The next average coach is Sean Payton, which this one might be disputed. A lot of people see him in high value. I just don't see it. I think there's been, with the Saints, they talked about him. Him and Drew Brees were this magical pairing. And he honestly, like looking back at that run, it's kind of a Mike McDaniel's run. You had your great quarterback, you won the one, but it seems like you continuously fall short. And there's always something with Sean Payton. There's always something. So what exactly is he going to do in Denver? He got to Denver, all the drama in Denver, this, that. Now they're here. He's got his quarterback. Now go prove that you are this great coach that everybody was rivaling about, that everybody said deserved the biggest coaching contract in the NFL. Like, go prove it to people. I think that's kind of what I'm waiting on. Could the Broncos do amazing this year and he all of a sudden jumps all the way up to great? That's very possible. In my heart, there's something about Sean Payton that just doesn't click with how people treat him. And that's why we put him in average. Brevin kind of felt the same way. There's just something that doesn't feel right putting him in great like I think a lot of people would. Our next one is Brian Daboll. The Giants under him, I mean, he's very up and down, and that's kind of what gets you put into this average category is when you're up and then you're down, and then you're up and you're really low, and there's just such these waves with the Giants, and there's been a lot of questionable decisions in terms of roster management and coaching staff and all these things which some of it is also front office, but the front office and the coach are usually making decisions together. Excuse me. I've also been feeling a little under the weather. But I think when he was coach of the year, I think he earned that. I thought he was going to be the next great coach. And then all of a sudden, the Giants completely backtrack and they're back to the old Giants before he got there. And it's like, what changed? What happened? So I think we just need to see him get back to that either top tier or he's going to stay at this low tier and we're going to know that coach of the year was just kind of a hot streak, just a glimpse into what potential could be. Our next coach in the average category is Todd Bowles. Todd Bowles as a DC, when they won that Super Bowl, I think he did a very good job. The thing that for me has Todd Bowles in the average category is since he's become a head coach, and I think he's been a head coach twice now, when you're a defensive guy, like, we should see that in your defense, and it just seems like especially last year, the thing holding them back was the defense. The offense, you can expect a new quarterback. Things are really changing, right? You can expect a little bit of bumps in that process. So you should be able to rely on your defense to work through those and keep you in games as your offense catches stride. The offense finally catches stride at the end of the year, and the defense is nowhere to be found. And it's like, as a head coach whose focus is on the defense, that cannot be a thing. And now you've lost your offensive coordinator. He got a job. So now is that offense going to, again, sputter a little bit as they get a new person calling plays and in charge? You're going to have to rely on your defense another season. Can you do that to be successful, right? I think his defense put him in average this year. The defense was average. He's average. They need to really excel this year and make that jump from what they did last year so that he can prove, like, I'm here to stay and I can win big games. The last one in average is Dan Quinn. Right? This is going to be his first year with the Commanders. He was a head coach at one point. He got fired, became the DC, did a good job DC at Dallas when they had big leads. He really struggled in close games. The close games aren't really what his defense, he built that Cowboys defense to win when they had a lead. And so when they get down, that defense kind of struggles. So it'll be interesting to see how he builds the Commanders and how he goes about that. And can he continue that elite defensive prowess while also getting Jayden Daniels and that offense going, right? This is his second opportunity to be a head coach. We just want to see it done better and more successful to get him out of average. I think he'll always be a coach. All of these coaches, I think they'll always be able to find jobs if they get fired, right? Like if Mike McCarthy gets fired, I could see him immediately getting another job. These coaches aren't bad coaches, but if your goal at the end of the season is to win a Super Bowl, I don't know if these guys get you there. I think these guys take teams from 4-12 to 8-8, 10-6, but I don't think they're going to hold up that trophy at the end of the year unless their team, their schedule, the other teams in the playoffs are perfect, in the perfect situation for them. So that's it for average. Now we go to promising. This promising category, again, is coaches that have shown flashes in these first couple of years of being a coach that they could be in this good category, definitely, possibly this great category, but we just want to see it more consistently before you just get thrown into great, and then you have a situation like Daboll, right? After his first year, I think everybody would have been like, he's a great coach, maybe, he's a great coach, definitely. And then all of a sudden they've had this last year, and it's like, whoa, maybe he's not that great. So that's where this promising comes in, is let's see you do it again, right? Repetition, repetition, repetition. That's the main part of football. Whether you're a player, whether you're a coach, whether you're a front office, whether you're a fan, everyone wants to see it be repeatable. And that's what we want out of this category. And the first up on this list is DeMeco Ryans, right? He's had 1 year. He came in and immediately flipped that organization, that team, and he's done amazing things. Now we need to see it done again. It's on the same lines as Daboll. Do it again. Don't fall off the cliff like he did, right? You can, right? The Texans, I think they've built their roster out. I think they have high hopes for this season. Let's say you make the playoffs and you lose to one of these better teams, right? I think he's still a good coach. I think he's still a great coach. I think it would take a disaster to put him any lower than good. I think this season would have to be a complete collapse for that to happen. Our next coach is going to be Shane Steichen. Right? I don't think, in terms of these other promising coaches, I don't think he's had as big standout, right? I don't think he's a big, well-known names in terms of, oh, he's done a great job coaching. But what he has done is he has an offense that works. He's built an offensive roster to fit how he wants to call the game, and he's got that locker room culture built. I think he's really progressing the Colts well in terms of expectations. There was little expectations, and they've even exceeded that, along with their rookie quarterback gets hurt. Now everyone expects them to really be dead, and all of a sudden they're still competing, still playing all the way up to the end against the Texans, where it came down to the last game between him and the Texans, and the Texans ended up coming up on top, and everyone's now talking about DeMeco Ryans, where Shane Steichen could have been in that exact same position if one game goes differently. So I think those two are right there next to each other. They're in the same division, so we really get to see that battle for who is the better coach, who wants to really take grasp of that division. So it's an exciting thing to be if you're a Colts or you're a Texans fan. The next coach we have here is, if my computer will work, is Antonio Pierce. I think he's looking for that same path as Dan Campbell. I think his strong suit is going to be his culture building and his motivation, getting that team going in the right direction. He just has to prove that he can get the team needed, right? Like we talk about, Dan Campbell needs that team. Dan Campbell needs that coaching staff. Antonio Pierce needs that same thing. He needs a good coaching staff. He needs a good team. Once he's got that and he gets them in the right direction, they're going to be a force to reckon with, just like the Lions. But it's about doing that. Can you do that consistently? Because I think, right, creating an offense and calling really good plays or whatever, like for an example, a Shane Steichen, I think that's way more repeatable and easier to continue to be good at compared to relying on making sure the right people are around you. Because all it takes is one bad apple, one wrong hire, one wrong signing, and everything collapses, and all of a sudden you're a bad coach, and all of a sudden you're getting fired. And it's like, well, if you would have hired one different DC, maybe things would be different. So I think his room for error is a lot smaller than a Shane Steichen or even a DeMeco Ryans. I think he needs to really prove that the Raiders aren't just, I don't think his hopes are as high as these other two. I think his hopes are more keep the Raiders competent, keep them competing. I think they're in a position to rebuild, so they just need to prove that, like, we are going to be that exact culture that he is installing. If you don't see that culture, then that culture coach obviously isn't doing what he's supposed to. So that's the first thing I want to see from the Raiders this year, because I want to see his impact on those players. And then our last promising coach is Kevin O'Connell. Maybe? Yep. Okay. Kevin O'Connell. He is another one who, when he got to the Vikings, that offense exploded. It was exciting. It was what everyone thought they were going to be. And then they kind of fell short. But once those new expectations were set, I think they exceeded expectations. Everyone said all these new high things, and then they fell short, and everyone kind of pushed them to the side. And then this year they're dealing with everything they dealt with in terms of injuries, and he still did good. Um, so I just want to see like a third year of his offense really being a staple, right? Being on the same lines of these other offensive coaches that's like, no matter who I have on my roster, no matter who's at the helm, no matter who's blocking, running, catching, doesn't matter. No matter what, my offense is going to be competent. And now he has to build the staff defensively and players defensively to be able to stop someone when it matters. Stop the other great offenses to really staple yourself, right? Coaching is a lot dependent on the other people around you. You can be a great offensive coach, but if your defense never gets a stop and you can never manage to win those big games because of your defense, you're going to get fired. And you can say, well, I'm doing my job. That doesn't matter. You're the head coach. You're responsible for the entire team. So being able to put that defense together is going to be a huge key, and it needs to be something on his mind. I think sometimes coaches get into that rut of, well, I need to focus on my side of the ball. I need to focus on my side of the ball. I need to focus on my game plan for whatever side I'm on. And then it kind of, you can push the blame of the other side of the ball to other people. And I think the great coaches, they don't do that. And I don't think he's going to do that. I'm not saying that. It can be a worrisome, and it can happen to anyone, and it can drop you quickly down this tier. So that's it for our promising. Our next category is going to be our questionable. Our questionable coaches are kind of like our promising coaches. They're newer. I think there's a couple people that have been here for a minute, but I don't want to put them on the hot seat because I don't think they're on the hot seat this year. But I think if they have another bad year or a bad year, you could quickly see them in the hot seat or returning if they're brand new to the questionable category for a second year in a row, which could lead you onto the hot seat. So I think these coaches are on a slippery slope where one wrong step and they are out of the league in terms of head coach. I'm sure they can get a different job as a coordinator or an assistant or something, but in terms of their head coach role, I think they could lose it some as quickly as they got it. And the first one on that list is Jonathan Gannon. When he was hired, it felt like a really weird hire in terms of for the Cardinals, right? It was coming off the Eagles Super Bowl. Shane Steichen ran the offense. He ran the defense. The defense was great. The offense was great. They both get hired. In terms of the Cardinals' situation hiring him, that's what kind of made me the most uncomfortable because you have Kyler Murray. Your offense, it was with Cliff Kingsbury. Your offense would perform and then fall off, then perform, fall off. And so you bring in Gannon, this defensive mind, and you're like, okay, they're going to focus on defense. But where does that leave someone like Kyler Murray, who he's making the big money? Like, you need Kyler to succeed. And I think it's really hard for defensive coaches to be successful. I would much rather take my shot on an offensive coach than a defensive coach because they have so many less reliabilities in terms of other people, right? Offense, you can always just try and score more points than the other team, right? That's Mike McDaniel said, I'm just trying to score more than the other team. You can have a high-scoring game and still win, but if you can't move the ball, then you're going to have problems. And I think there's another coach on this list that's in that same boat, which Gannon could be in potentially in the coming years, is my defense is performing well, but I have sorely neglected the offense, and I don't know how to fix the offense that can get him fired. And the defense has not been well, right? If he came in and the defense was playing insane, I think he would have a little bit more of a cushion. But when his defense isn't playing great, offense it's got so many question marks and it's in such a weird situation that you're not sure. I think that's what's left him in this questionable position only a year in. That next person in questionable is Gannon's old head coach, Nick Sirianni, which I'm sure people have been seeing him just sitting here once we got through these top tiers. and was really starting to wonder where I was putting him. I put him in the questionable because of the ups and downs, right? They made the Super Bowl. Was the Super Bowl completely on these two shoulders in the roster? They had an elite roster. Howie did a great job with that. Built him a perfect roster, got him perfect DC, perfect OC, and then everything jived together. They had a great season and they made the Super Bowl. And then last season happens. And it's like, what was that? I don't It was great, and then all of a sudden they collapsed and they were atrocious and everything. I mean, when you say up and down, I think of Nick Sirianni and this Eagles team. I need to see him prove that he can get this team right back on the right track, and last year was a fluke. They fire that DC. They blame him for it. They're excited for Vic Fangio, I believe, is their new DC. Him coming in, they're super excited for that. They drafted more pieces. They're always going to do great in draft. Howie's an awesome GM. Can you get back to where you were at, or is next season going to be another up and down mess where it ends in disaster? I think if they don't do well next year, I think he could find himself potentially on the hot seat because the Eagles ownership knows how well of a roster, how he's been able to build. And I think they're going to look at Nick Sirianni and be like, you are the reason we're not getting back to the Super Bowl. So I think as quickly as their rise to success could be his rise to out of the league. Our next coach in the questionable category is Robert Saleh, who I compared Gannon to when I was talking about Gannon. He's a defensive coach with big pedigree, big hopes for him. He goes to New York and his defense balls out. But the atrocity that happened on the offensive side year in and year out has kept people wondering, can Robert Saleh actually get the Jets where they need to be? Is he a great defensive mind? Is his defense always performing well? Is his defense always performing well? Yes. Can he be a head coach in this league and his team be successful? Is the question. Last year, the hopes were the highest of the highs, right? I think if Aaron Rodgers doesn't get hurt next year and they still fall short, I think he potentially could have been fired. But Aaron Rodgers immediately gets hurt. They deal with all that. I think Johnson is going to give him this year. But if this year ends disastrously or they fall short miserably, I think Robert Saleh could see himself either out of the league or 100% the hottest seat in the hot seat. So I think he's riding a fine line of, yes, his defense is good, but his team success is way more important at this point. I don't care how well your defense does. If this team doesn't win, you're gone. Our next one would be Brian Callahan. This one is questionable just because I don't get it. I think there were better options for head coaches in terms of candidates. Again, I'm not in the interview process. I'm not hearing the questions or the situation or what exactly they were looking for. But on the surface level, from the outside, this feels like a really weird hiring. And actually, we can put in our next candidate in the questionable, Dave Canales, because I think I feel the same way about both of them. The hirings just don't feel right. Could they work out? I can see how they can work out. I can see what they're going for. But in terms of floor, I'm a lot more nervous that their floor could be way lower than other people they could have got. So that's what makes me nervous. I think their ceilings, right? Like I look at a Ben Johnson. If I'm picking an offensive guy, I feel like I'm picking Ben Johnson more than I'm picking these two. That's just, these two getting hired over Ben Johnson was kind of weird for me. So that's what puts them in questionable, is because I just don't see the direction the teams are going. Can it work out? Yes. Does this year, could they ball out? Could their teams ball out? Could they be great? Yes, they both have young quarterbacks. They both are in a situation where they can sculpt the team how they want. They're right at the beginning of a rebuild. So maybe that's what it was, right? The fit with Will Levis and Bryce Young, really wanting to get those guys. That pairing is the most important. Quarterback and offensive mind are the most important pairing in football. So maybe that was 100% the decision. They just said, we want to get the best guy for Bryce Young. We want to get the best guy for Will Levis. And that's all that matters. But it's risky. So that's why I have him in questionable, is I just want to see what happens with those teams. Now, two, the one we've been waiting for, the hot seat. First up on the hot seat is Matt Eberflus, which honestly, I think I talked about in the mock draft maybe a little bit, but this Caleb Williams, I think maybe buys him an extra year. I think going into this year, if he didn't draft Caleb Williams and he kept Justin Fields and they fall short, he's immediately fired. But if they don't do great this year, they kind of are, I think he gets another year because he can have the excuse of it's Caleb's rookie year, da 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 da. Give me one more year with this team. We can get the culture going in the right direction. We can get everyone together and really prove in Caleb's second year that I am what I got hired to be. So I think he maybe has bought himself an extra year. I don't think he's immediately on the hot seat unless this season is an 0-16 or 0-17 season. Then I could see him being fired, but I think he's kind of in 2 years hot seat. This year goes bad, he's the first on this list. Same with a Robert Saleh. I think both of these guys, if this year goes bad, they're immediately there. I've never thought he was the right fit for the Bears, so that's why I have him on the hot seat and Robert Saleh on the questionable, is because Robert Saleh actually has. I can see the Jets succeeding this year. I don't see the Bears succeeding at the level that they would need to for me to want to keep Eberflus if I was the owner. So that's why he's in the hot seat. Our next one in the hot seat of our three is Doug Peterson. Doug Peterson, if I were to make a comparison, would be a Mike McCarthy. I think he is a good coach. I think he needs to be in the right situation, the perfect situation to be able to succeed at the highest level. I think you give him a bad team, he's going to make it decent. I think he's going to make it average. But I don't think if I want a Super Bowl contender roster, I don't think I'm picking Doug Peterson to be the helm of it. And with Trevor Lawrence, I think the Jags feel like they're in that position. I think they feel like they should be competing, especially after they make that comeback against the Chargers. All hope is high. They come into this year and they kind of dud. I think if they dud again this year, I think that owner could be looking to move on and feel that same way. Thank you, Doug, for getting us to where we're at. Thank you for getting us into the playoffs and competing. Now we need someone to push us over that edge, which isn't easy to find. So, but I think it's a move that needs to happen if they dud this season. If they come out and they perform well and they're battling in the AFC, I think he stays. He's in a situation, I think. I don't see in the hardest division or in the hardest conference, I think the Jags get snuffed out a little bit, especially the competition that he now has in his division with DeMeco Ryans and Shane Steichen. I could see them getting drowned out of their own division, and I think that would really make the owner mad. But our last one on the hot seat is Dennis Allen. I don't actually know if he's anywhere near the hot seat. Honestly, the Saints are an organization that you could tell me they did one thing and I would say makes sense. You could tell me they did the opposite thing and I would say that also makes sense. It feels like the Saints are always doing what you least expect. so it's hard to really predict anything for them. I just think Dennis Allen has that team floating, just at mediocre, just floating right there at mediocre. The roster seems like a mess. They've been slowly trying to fix it while still competing, and they're in this really weird spot. They don't want to rebuild, but they need to rebuild. They Nothing they really do is great. So I think if the Saints fall apart again this year, not fall apart, but again anyway, if they don't do something that is really impressive, at least in their division, if they don't win the division, I could see Dennis Allen getting fired and finally the owner accepting the rebuild, right? Bringing in a guy and saying, all right, fix this roster the way you want it. Dennis Allen inherited Sean Payton's roster and kind of mess. Um, tried to keep it going, and it just didn't work. So if it doesn't work again, I could see him getting flushed out in order to restart that rebuild finally. And lastly is our unknown. Our unknown category starts off with Raheem Morris. Do I think Raheem Morris is a good coach? Yes. I think he is a very good defensive mind. I think the Falcons defense will be playing good. The reason I have him in the unknown is because the roster the Falcons have, they have put so much capital into that offense, and then to turn around and immediately hire a defensive coach really doesn't make sense. Right? Your defense, you've kind of neglected a little bit. You spent a little bit of money with Jessie Bates. You have, Grady Jarrett. You have AJ Terrell. You have pieces there, but it's just pieces. Your offense, you have spent everything you have in that offense, and then you hire a defensive coach. Right? If I look at it as if I was the owner and I had that roster, I would have been immediately calling the best available offensive mind I had, and I would have been like, please coach my team. No, okay, next one, please coach my team. I think the last person I would have hired would be a defensive guy. Right? Does that mean Raheem Morris is a bad coach? No, I think he's a very good coach. I think he will do good things with the Falcons. It just doesn't make sense to me why. Why it doesn't fit it. And then on top of that, to reinforce that statement, you come into this draft, you have an 8 pick, you have a defensive minded coach, you can get the perfect piece for him to be able to build that defense. They haven't had a double digit sack person since Vic Beasley's superstar run those couple of years. And now you're bringing in a defensive guy. Like, let him get a Dallas Turner or whoever on defense he would have liked, so that he could really be like, all right, if our offense is in trouble, I at least know my defense can carry us. And they go and get a backup quarterback for the future. Like, they're just 1,000% relying that Raheem Morris can have this team playing above expectation. And that's a risky slope to play on. I hope he does it because I think he does deserve an NFL job. I just don't know if the Falcons was the right NFL job for him. Our next one, which is kind of self-explanatory, is Jerod Mayo. Expectations. I don't think there's one person that could have expectations for Mayo at this point, right? I think the unknown was kind of made for him. He's coming into an organization that's just been Bills for so long. He's a brand new coach, right? Some of these guys like Raheem, we've seen him be a head coach before. We know what to expect from him. Jerod's coming into this scene with a lot of question marks. So it'll be interesting to see exactly what he does. Could he be the next great coach? I'm sure. Could he be on the hot seat very quickly in a couple of years? Sure. That is the definition of the unknown, and this category should just probably be named the Mayo tier, because he is the definition. And our last person for our Seahawks fans is Mike Macdonald. The thing for me about him being unknown is he he wasn't a part of the Ravens for very long. He doesn't have this long history of, all right, yeah, we can expect this from him. Like I feel like some of these other coaches, and he's coming into Seattle where the roster, the front office, just everything, there's a lot of question marks surrounding it. So I think that puts a question mark for him, right? What can we expect from them? Is he going to take that team? Is he there to compete? Is he there to push for playoffs? Or is he there to reshape the team into its future era? And that's kind of why I put him in the unknown, is what exactly is he there to do? Is he going to make a stud defense, right? Recreate that Legion of Boom, or are they expecting him to compete at the highest level with an offense led by Geno Smith, with a defense that's missing quite a few important pieces to really be one of those elite tier defenses? The Seahawks are in that middle spot, kind of like the Saints, and I think he is coming into that situation, and I don't know what outlook they're going to have on it. Right? Dennis Allen is in the hot seat because he's in that situation, and the Saints wanted him to compete for Super Bowls out of that situation and rebuild at the same time. And very, very, very rarely is that ever successful. So I just have concerns that that's what the Seahawks are going to expect from him. And I think he could find himself on the hot seat. Or they could not. They could say, build the team how you want. You've got time. And he could do it exactly how he wanted. He could have an elite defense, and he could find himself in that good, great category. Because with that defense in Baltimore, it was scary. It was scary hours. But Seattle is not that. So I don't know if they expect that from him. And that's why I have him in the unknown. So, with that, that concludes our list of all 32 NFL coaches and in their tiers, why they're in their tiers. It was a little bit longer of a video. Sorry for Brevin being gone, me being a little bit under the weather. Not completely, I just got a little something. Hopefully, we should have the next episode out by next weekend. Once he's feeling better, he's gonna be here. The next episode we're excited for. We have a great idea for, and I think you're really gonna like. But hopefully you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. Turn on the notifications. Follow our social medias.